Have you ever wondered, maybe the reason you're always alone and struggling isn't because you failed, but because you've been chosen for something far greater? Have you ever asked yourself why you seem to struggle with money every single day even though you're not lazy, not lacking in talent? Why, in a world so loud and crowded, you still feel like the loneliest soul in the room, as if your spirit is speaking a language no one else remembers? You're not the only one who feels this way, and you're not a failure. You're simply living differently. While the rest of the world races to build wealth through old systems, built on competition, dominance, and control, you were born to do the opposite, to live truthfully, to heal, to awaken, and to help create a new world where money is no longer the god, just a tool. That's why you feel out of place. That's why you feel broke, because your soul refuses to bow to systems that no longer belong to you. The price of light is loneliness. When you carry a subtle, deep frequency within you, you can no longer merge into shallow conversations or surface-level connections. You become hard to understand, not because you're complicated, but because you're so simple it's hard to believe. You don't manipulate, you don't pretend. You simply show up fully, and that alone makes people uncomfortable. Because truth, no matter how gently it arrives, always bruises the ego. So you grow quiet. No one hates you, but no one truly gets you either. You become a mirror, and the clearer the mirror, the harder it is for others to ignore what they've been hiding. And so, they leave. No drama, no explosions, just absence. Eventually, you learn one of the most sacred lessons. Your inner light was never meant to guide the crowd. It's a quiet flame, meant to guide you as you walk alone through the darkness of your own becoming. And then, one day, somewhere in the long, stretched-out silence, you realize loneliness isn't a curse. It's a rite of passage. No one steps into a great journey without first walking through the wilderness of the soul. The isolation you feel, it isn't punishment. It's a sign. You've shifted frequencies. You no longer belong to the old vibrations. You don't resonate with shallow talk, with social circles built on control, comparison, and performance. You're vibrating on a different level now, a space where there's no room left for pretending. And in that space, the light you carry becomes a double-edged sword. It can guide, but it can also hurt. It can heal, but first, it forces others to face wounds they've spent a lifetime avoiding. Not everyone is ready for that. So they withdraw, not because you're too different, but because they're not yet ready to be different. And those who stay, though rare, though few, they are the souls who have begun their own transformation, and they see you, not with their eyes, but with their hearts. You used to believe that if you were honest, kind, and gave your whole heart, people would eventually understand. But then you learned a painful truth. Not everyone has the capacity to receive the light you offer. You're the healer, the listener, the one who shows up when others are breaking. You lift them. You breathe life into them. You remind them of their worth when they've forgotten. But when you need someone, they're not there. Not because they're bad people, but because they don't have the space to give back what you've so freely poured into them. You weren't just giving your time. You were giving your frequency, your emotion, your life force. And slowly, that drained you. You became exhausted, anxious, empty, alone, even when surrounded by those you once held up. So you chose to step back, not out of bitterness, but out of survival. You learned to be selective, to love without needing to rescue, to give without losing the parts of you that still needed to stay whole. Because now you understand, a light bearer cannot live forever in relationships that slowly dim their flame. And then one day, after enough silence, you finally understand, solitude was never an accident. It was a rite of passage. You weren't abandoned. You were called inward, because there are things you can only hear when you're alone. The quiet sigh of your soul, the echo of old wounds, and the soft whisper of the sacred, waiting for you to come closer. In that stillness, you begin to look back at the parts of yourself you traded for love, at the beliefs that no longer belong to you, at the cracks you thought were healed, but were only hidden. So you begin to peel back the layers, one by one, not to be more pleasing, but to be more you. Raw, real, and unapologetically whole. And it's there, in the quiet that once felt like nothing, that you realized you were being trained, not to become better, but to become truer, to become someone quiet enough to hear the call of your mission. Brave enough to walk it, even if no one walks with you, because now you know true light doesn't come from applause. It's distilled from the darkness you've dared to face within. Money, in this world, is more than paper or numbers. It's energy, a flow, a frequency, a material expression of how we perceive our own worth. And for the chosen ones, that flow often gets blocked, not because they lack ability, but because they carry invisible inheritances, limiting beliefs, deep ancestral wounds around worthiness, survival, and self-value. Maybe it was the voice of a father who failed, whispering, "Money is never enough," or the shadow of a mother who settled for less, saying, "As long as we survive, that's all that matters." Maybe it was an entire bloodline, generation after generation, living in lack, in fear, in anxious obedience, terrified that abundance would lead to rejection or loss. And you, without even realizing, inherited it all. But you weren't born to repeat that cycle. You were born to heal it, to stand at the end of a lineage and open a new path. A path where money is no longer a fear, but a natural flowing current that responds to the service of your soul. But before that flow can return, there is a sacred task before you, to untie the invisible knots, to face every unconscious belief, and to forgive, not just your ancestors, but also the past versions of yourself who didn't know better. There are moments when you look at your nearly empty bank account and quietly ask yourself, what am I doing with my life? Did I take the wrong path, or am I just too dreamy in a world built on practicality? But then, amidst all that confusion, a small voice rises within you. Keep going, trust. There's a hand holding you, even if your eyes can't see it yet. That is the real lesson. Not about money, but about faith. It's not that you're unworthy of abundance. It's that your soul is being trained to only receive wealth when you're quiet enough inside not to be controlled by it. The universe doesn't want you to become rich from fear. It doesn't want you to chase money from a place of lack. It wants you to meet money like a companion, without attachment, without possession. And so the phase of scarcity becomes necessary to teach you you are still loved, still guided, even when your hands are empty. And then, when you stop struggling, stop controlling, stop punishing yourself for not being enough, you begin to feel it. Alignment. Opportunities appear, not from pressure, but from divine timing. Not for you to prove something, but to serve something greater. And in that space, money is no longer a reward, it becomes a result. Effortless, unforced, and fully deserved. When you begin to see clearly, that money doesn't buy peace. That fame doesn't cure loneliness. That success doesn't always mean happiness. You start to step away from the race, not because you look down on the world, but because you begin to see what others aren't ready to see. You notice the cracks beneath polished performance. You sense the fear behind successful smiles. You hear the faint calling in the eyes of people who say they're fine, and you can't pretend anymore. Your presence, quiet as it is, becomes a question the world doesn't know how to answer. But what about your soul? Tonight, when no one's watching, are you truly at peace with yourself? And so, you are pushed away, not because you tried to stand out, but because the truth in you is so still. It reflects back things that make others uncomfortable. You no longer fit into the old frameworks. You no longer align with the standards society built. And that makes you misunderstood, mistrusted, even labeled as different. But deep down, you know, the price of awakening is always distance. But that distance is exactly where freedom lives. If you're feeling lost, broke, like you don't belong anywhere, pause. Place your hand over your heart. And remember this, you're not on the wrong path. You're just walking one that few dare to take. Loneliness isn't emptiness, it's stillness. The sacred space where your soul can finally hear its true calling. Lack isn't failure, it's a doorway, an invitation to trust that your true worth doesn't need to shout to be seen. It shines when you're quiet enough to witness it. Everything you're going through, every lonely night, every hard month, is not meant to break you. It's meant to refine you into the person you were always born to become. An awakened soul, a bearer of light, a guide, not just for yourself, but for others still lost in the dark. The universe is preparing you, not just for spiritual abundance, but for material wholeness too. But this time, not from fear, not from pressure, from alignment, from the quiet harmony between your purpose and your life. And when you move forward with your whole truth in your heart, everything will come. The right timing, the right people, the right way. Not too soon, not too late, just perfectly in tune.